Could Konsta Helenius fall to the Blackhawks at number 18? I'll share my thoughts on that, and we'll dish out my Stanley Cup Final prediction.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, just a quick reminder, if you're watching on YouTube right now, hit that like button for me. Comment down below as well as to your thoughts on Konsta Helenius, whether you would like to see the Blackhawks add him to their prospect pool, and also give me your predictions since we now know the matchup for this year's Stanley Cup Final. The Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, the big guns, taking on the Florida Panthers. Go and comment down below your prediction. Who's going to be taking home the Stanley Cup this year? Also, make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well, because starting later on this week, I'm actually going to be getting into my Chicago Blackhawks Summer 2024 Top 10 Prospects list. And I promise you're not going to want to miss out on that. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. And last but certainly not least, got to let you all know today's episode sponsored by FanDuel. Sign up today and visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, as always, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Got another 2024 NHL Draft Profile here to kick things off on the show today. It's going to be a reoccurring theme here as we're now into the month of June, which is pretty crazy to say. We're already at the halfway mark of 2024, and time just absolutely flies. It's yet another reminder of that fact, but we're down to less than 4 weeks away from this year's NHL draft, and I still have a boatload of prospects that I need to get into here on the show. And another quick reminder, if there's a certain prospect that you want to hear more about, I've covered most of the projected top 10 so far in this draft. Obviously, Ivan Demidov and Artem Levshinov are the kind of two horses the Blackhawks are thinking about mostly, I'd imagine, for the number 2 overall pick, but I've also covered Cole Yzerman, Zane Parekh, Zeev Buium, Anton Salayev, Sam Dickinson, Carter Yakimchuk. So make sure to go and check those out if there's someone in particular you want to hear more about. You can easily find them on my YouTube channel under the 2024 NHL Draft playlist. But the next draft profile that I'm going to be getting into here today is none other than Konsta Helenius, a 5'11", 185-pound forward who's played the center and the wing so far in his young career, but I do believe has a lot of upside, capable to be a center at the next level. And he turned 18 back in May, less than 1 month ago, and as a 17-year-old impressively recorded 36 points, 14 goals, and 22 assists in 51 Liga games this past year. And as a reminder for those who may not know, that's the top professional men's league over in Finland. And his 0.71 point per game margin is actually the third highest for any Liga or for any draft eligible prospect in the Liga over the last 25 years, behind only Alexander Barkov and Patrick Laine, both of which went number 2 overall in their respective draft. And Konsta Helenius actually had a higher point per game marker than Mikko Rantanen did during his draft eligible season. So some really impressive numbers there. He also even played 33 Liga games as a 16-year-old the year before and didn't put up shoddy numbers either. 11 points, 4 goals, and 7 assists in those 33 games. He also had 7 assists in 5 games for Finland at the U18 World Juniors, 2 points, kind of a bit of an underwhelming performance in 7 games at the U20 World Juniors, but of course was one of the younger players there in that tournament, and also just had 1 assist in 4 games for Finland at the World Championships. Expected to be playing in Liga once again next year. I believe he's played his first 2 years for Jukurit. He's going to be playing for Tappara, I think is how it's pronounced, next year. So going to be with a different club after being on loan with Jukurit the last couple of years, but some really impressive stuff for a young kid, as I mentioned, in the top professional men's league over in Finland. As far as the rankings go here for Konsta Helenius, he was ranked 12th by Elite Prospects, 8th by Bob McKenzie, 3rd by Craig Button, 19th by Tony Ferrari, 8th by McKean's Hockey, 9th by Chris Peters, 12th by Daily Faceoff, 13th by Sportsnet, and 8th by Dobber Prospects. So some folks have him sprinkling into the top 10. Craig Button apparently loves this kid, has him as high as number 3, while Tony Ferrari has the lowest ranking here at number 19. But somewhere I would imagine around 10 or 15 is where I think Konsta Helenius is going to go. Diving into his strengths and weaknesses, though, first and foremost, when you watch the highlight film on this kid, he just makes an impact all over the ice. He competes really hard in all 3 zones, and it feels like his work ethic is always on display, and that's something that NHL scouts are really going to notice. This kid isn't just an offensive-minded player. He thrives and makes a constant effort to win pucks back when he doesn't have them and just make his presence felt all over the ice. And truthfully, he might have the best motor and well-rounded game of any of the top prospects that I've covered so far in the draft. And what's really impressive too is that he's done it at the pro level for the last year and a half as a 16 and 17-year-old. But diving into his attributes, he's a really good skater. He's got good crossovers, good edge work. He's a shifty skater as well, can turn directions in a hurry in order to kind of create some open ice for himself. He doesn't have the best top level speed, but all in all is a good skater. And despite not having the largest frame, 5'11", only about $185 as of right now is what he's listed at. He knows how to use his body in order to shield the puck away from defenders, in order to continue, keeping the puck alive in the cycle and wait for something to happen and make the right read. He's really good at holding onto the puck, like I said, despite not having the largest frame whatsoever. And he also has really good vision and good playmaking senses. He reads the play in front of him really well and has a good stretch pass capable when he reads the ice in front of him really well also. And as far as his shot, I think he's always going to be more of a playmaker than a goal scorer, but he does have a decent shot. He's got a good curl and drag release that he doesn't show too often, but he scored a couple of beauties in Liga this past year, just blowing it by the opposing goaltender and also recognizing that he can use the defender in front of him as a screener. So he's just got a really well-rounded game, and there's not one glaring weakness in his skill set. But when we talk about the weaknesses here, the most prevalent part I would say about it is just how high is his upside, because while there aren't any like huge flaws, he doesn't necessarily possess any elite talent or any elite attribute like most of the prospects that I've covered here on the show so far does. But what I will say is he's clearly a smart kid. He's one of the smartest and hardest working players that I've covered, like I said. So I believe that he's going to have that work ethic and that desire to get better, and he's going to put in the time and effort in order to try to develop these attributes and continue rounding out his game. And he's also put up really good numbers everywhere he's been. So it's not like he's been held back by any means by not having that so-called elite skill set or that one outstanding trait like a lot of these prospects have. He just had the, third best point per game margin in Liga history. So like, there's obviously a lot to like about his game, but I think these next few years are going to be really big for his development in determining, can he be a top line center at the NHL level, or is he just going to be kind of a middle six guy who's really not someone who drives play a lot? He doesn't have anything that necessarily pops. But as far as my projection, while there are some upside concerns, I think it's pretty clear that he's going to be a very solid NHL player. Like, he has those great instincts, great compete level, great work ethic, and he's got good skills. They're just not top of the line like some of the other guys in the draft. He's also a good defensive player. He makes efforts on that side of things. And, there's a common phrase around the NHL, you don't really ever have a bad Swede or a bad Finn. So I'm sure he's probably, this is maybe unfair of me to assume, but a good locker room guy, and based on his demeanor on the ice, you would think off of the ice, he's someone who's wanting to put in the work as well. So I think he's going to be a guy who impacts the game all over the ice in some capacity. As far as a point per game margin, maybe like a 40 to 50 point guy, but could be a power play 2 guy, could also be a penalty killer. potentially down the road as well, like a safe middle six type piece. If all goes well, if he does continue to develop rather nicely over these next couple of years, then I do think it's possible for him to have 60 to 70 point upside at the NHL level. And one player I've seen comparisons to potentially is Sebastian Aho, if he does work out potentially. I probably have him a little bit below that. I don't know if he necessarily has that skill set, but I do think he's going to be a solid NHL player, and I think he probably gets drafted somewhere between number 10 and number 15. From a Blackhawks perspective, a potential long-term fit here, I think he could be a very good player to add to this Blackhawks forward group. The thing about it is, I don't see him falling to number 18. I don't see that being a possibility. And at the same point in time, it's also going to depend on maybe some other players who have a higher ceiling could fall out of the top 10 that I think would be more intriguing options for the Blackhawks to trade up and get. So he's another guy where we kind of got to see how things sort out ahead of him. But hey, if he's there at number 13 or number 14, I wouldn't hate to go and trade up to get him if the asking price wasn't ridiculous. One thing I did hear as well on the internet from multiple different people is this, and as well as Michael Branzag-Nygaard. They feel like potential Red Wings picks at number 15 for Stevie Y. And obviously the Blackhawks are 3 spots behind that at number 18. So if they do really like Konsta Helenius and he falls to number 14, you probably got to go and get him before the Red Wings do, because this could be a guy that they have circled. So I personally think he would be a really good add, someone who provides a lot to the table and not just offense. I've talked a lot on the show about how the Blackhawks, they've got their high-end skill guys, and yeah, you always want to go and get those. They're going to do that at number 2 this year, but you want to also add pieces to the puzzle that can contribute in different ways, and I think Konsta Helenius is one of those guys that could do that. So if they find a way to, get him at number 14, I wouldn't be mad at that whatsoever if the asking price wasn't ridiculous. And if somehow he fell to number 18, I'd be absolutely happy about it. It's also going to be interesting to see if the Blackhawks do take Ivan Demidov, like I expect, at number 2. I would go with best player available first at number 18, and Konsta Helenius would absolutely be that if he falls there, I would imagine. But it will be interesting to see how the Blackhawks weigh the defenseman options that could be available later on in the first round there as well, over someone like Konsta Helenius or some of the other forward prospects that I'm going to be breaking down on the show here over the next couple of weeks. But that's going to wrap up Konsta Helenius's 2024 NHL Draft Profile. Go and jump in the comment section down below. Let me know what you have to say about this kid's game. And let me know if you think he would also be a good add, like I do, to the Blackhawks prospect pool, even though it kind of does seem unlikely. That's going to take care of his draft profile. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, don't go anywhere, because I'm about to dish out my prediction for this year's Stanley Cup Final. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the championship trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, eBay Motors has got you covered. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, make sure to check out eBay Motors, because they have over 122 million parts to choose from, so you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. Plus, with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or else you'll get your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. With all the parts you need at the prices you actually want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and to bring home that championship trophy. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Again, that's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only and exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, segment 2, we now have our matchup in the 2024 Stanley Cup Final, as the Florida Panthers are back looking to avenge their loss from last season to the Vegas Golden Knights, and they'll be taking on a couple of juggernauts in Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and the Edmonton Oilers. Oh, baby, what a matchup we got on our hands. Barkov versus McJesus. Canada looking for their first Stanley Cup winner since 1993, I believe. The Montreal Canadiens were the last team to do it. So we got Canada, and then the team from South Beach basically is back in this thing once again. And what a hockey state Florida has turned into over these last handful of years. The Tampa Bay Lightning obviously had those back-to-back Stanley Cup victories, and now the Panthers, they fell short last year, but looking to avenge that loss. They're going to have quite a task on their hands, though, as the Edmonton Oilers are coming in hot after how they were able to take down the Dallas Stars in 6 games. There goes my projected Stanley Cup winner. My bracket is officially toasted. I did have this matchup picked correctly. I had the Dallas Stars taking on the Edmonton Oilers in the conference final, but I really thought that the Stars were going to be able to keep that momentum going from their last round, a really impressive series win over the Colorado Avalanche, and they were on track to do so. They held a 2-1 advantage in this series through the first 3 games, but the Oilers rallied back hard to win games 4, 5, and 6. And what a performance, I got to say, first and foremost, by Stuart Skinner. This man deserves a boatload of credit for the Oilers reaching the Stanley Cup Final here. The first time that Connor McDavid has been able to accomplish that feat, and Stuart Skinner absolutely has a ton to do with it. He balled out these last couple of games, allowed just 4 goals in those last 3 games, all of which led to Oilers victories. Edmonton got outshot 34-10 in Game 6. The Stars came with that desperation, especially late, but he held down the fort strong the entire time. And got to give a lot of credit to the Stars for the Edmonton Oilers as well. The Stars, LOL. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in game 5, huge couple of goals early to put Edmonton up 2-0, and then in the clincher, Connor McDavid doing Connor McDavid things with just a nasty goal to put Edmonton ahead 1-0. Zach Hyman winds up with the game winner. As I said, the Stars came with a good late push, but it ultimately wasn't enough. And the Oilers going to the Stanley Cup, I honestly did not see that one coming. The other series, though, the New York Rangers against the Florida Panthers, I kind of had a feeling that the runaway freight train that is the Panthers was going to have their way with the Rangers. I actually projected Florida to get this one done in 5 games. They ultimately ended up getting it done in 6. Igor Shesterkin did all that he could to keep the Rangers alive, but his efforts could only last for so long. And just like the Florida Panthers, just like the Edmonton Oilers, the Florida Panthers also faced a 2-1 deficit over the first 3 games of that series, but then found a way to win games 4, 5, and 6 as well. So both of these teams coming into the Stanley Cup Final in some really good form. The Florida Panthers, though, man, spoiler alert, I'm taking them to win the Stanley Cup this year. I think, they got that experience from last year, and they're just really playing some great hockey all over the place. Sergei Bobrovsky, I talked about Stuart Skinner being, the big, I don't want to say unsung hero, but he's really the driving force that is led to the Oilers getting over that hump. Sergei Bobrovsky, how good has this guy been over the last couple of postseasons? Remember, I'd be having, for those of you who have been listening or watching the show for a while now, when I would have crossovers with Armando Velez, the host of Locked On Panthers, when these two teams, funny enough, were in the same division during that weird 56-game COVID-shortened season. We talked about how Sergei Bobrovsky, he was a talking point basically every time that we did a crossover because he wasn't playing good and he was paid as the highest goaltender in the league. That's now worked out rather nicely for the Panthers. He's been phenomenal, a 2.20 goals against average in all 12 victories for Florida here in the postseason. But it's been a really well-rounded effort for them. Matthew Tkachuk has been great up front. We know how good Sam Reinhart's been this year. Carter Verhaeghe has chipped in nicely offensively. And on the defensive side of things, they got some anchors back there, man. One of them absolutely breaks my heart because it's Gustav Forsling, who has just developed into such a nice defenseman here. Obviously, we did see some signs of that in his early days with the Chicago Blackhawks. It took him a while to get to that level, but I think it is a nice little reminder that defensemen just take some time to develop, and sometimes you can't quit on them too early, especially the undersized ones. So, I'm happy for Gustav Forsling. Turned into one of the best well-rounded defensemen in the NHL. Signed a nice big ticket with the Panthers, securing his home there for the first time in his NHL career. Very well-deserved. Brandon Montour has been excellent. Alexander Barkov. Aaron Ekblad has also been great on the defensive side of things. This is a team that's rolling right now. So as far as my prediction, I'm going with the Florida Panthers in 6 games. I got to go with my boy Armando Velez. But honestly, no bias aside, I just think the Florida Panthers are running hot. Stuart Skinner is absolutely going to have to be standing on his head for the Oilers to have a chance in the series. I'm not going to, I'm not going to count out Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, though. The motivation is going to be there, and while a player of McDavid's caliber, you'd assume, is going to be back, you just never know. Hockey's a weird sport. There's a reason why, he's 27, going to be going on 28 next year. There's a reason why he's never been there, despite having dominated this league year in and year out for almost a decade now. It's just hard to get here. So it's going to be really interesting seeing, I think, a better, well-rounded Florida Panthers team taking on the motivated Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They're going to be trying to will their team to victory. Should be an excellent series. I'm going with the Florida Panthers in 6, though. Drop your prediction down below in the comment section right now. Let me hear you. You got the Edmonton Oilers becoming the first Stanley Cup winner out of Canada since 1993, or do you think the Florida Panthers, like me, are going to avenge their loss against the Vegas Golden Knights from last season? That's going to take care of my preview and prediction here of the 2024 Stanley Cup Final, though. Coming up in just a minute, I still have to get into our weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment. Real quick, though, got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel, because we're into the finals now for both the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's also in full swing, and FanDuel is the perfect place for you to bet on every single game. And right now, new customers get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed when they sign up for FanDuel. Yes, you heard me right. That's $150 worth of bonus bets, win or lose. And you can use these bonuses to bet on everything from slap shots throughout the Stanley Cup Final to home runs across all the great ballparks and even slam dunks en route to the NBA championship, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Go and make your first bet a guaranteed win by visiting FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win worth $150 worth of bonus bets. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A quick reminder to smash that like button for me. Comment down below with your question. I know we're already on Mailbag Monday right now, so if you comment down below, I'm obviously not going to be able to get to it right here, right now, but I will be able to answer your question at this time on next week's show. Go and drop your Blackhawks questions down in the comment section. You can also reach out on the community tab on my YouTube channel. You can email lockdownblackhawks@gmail.com, DM me on any one of my socials. There's lots of ways to reach out with your questions, and I can only do this segment if you do reach out with your questions. So please help me help you. Drop those down in the comment section below right now. But let's go ahead and get into the questions for today. First and foremost, we got a question from @RobertJames5199 on YouTube, who asked, "Hey Jack, what are the chances the Hawks deal Seth Jones?" I'm going to say very unlikely, Robert, at least for the next 4 years, because, well, Seth has a full no movement clause, so he can't get traded even if he wanted to. But let's say Seth Jones does want to waive that no movement clause. Let's say he's sick of waiting around here in Chicago. He knows his clock is ticking. He's getting up into his 30s. He wants to go and play somewhere competitive right now. Well, the problem with that is he's still got 6 years left at $9.5 million. And that's a contract that not many teams, if any, are going to be wanting to take on, even with the salary cap going up. And the Blackhawks would likely have to give assets in order to trade a contract like Seth Jones's. So it's probably not even worth it at that point. The Blackhawks have to give up more in order to get rid of Seth Jones. I think the hope is just that, I mean, he's had flashes over these last couple of years. Is he a perfect top pairing defenseman? Absolutely not. And I think he needs a partner like an Alex Vlasic, or prior to that, like a Jake McCabe, in order for him to make him a worthwhile top pairing guy. But I do still think he's capable of playing some good hockey, and with better pieces around him. We saw what he did with Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat in his first year here in Chicago. He put up some really good offensive numbers. Now, I also need to knock him. He's got to do better in order to drive those plays and to make it happen. But I do think he's capable of better days with more talent on its way. So I think the only real option, though, that the Blackhawks have is just hope that he can be better, because with 6 years left at that price tag and a full no movement clause, it's going to be nearly impossible to trade him. Next question comes from @ShimmerDay1664, who asked, hey, could you possibly go over who you think the Hawks might take with their pick at number 18, or if they might make another deal to move up higher? Thanks. So I am still going over a lot of my NHL draft profiles here on the show. So I'm still taking in some knowledge about a lot of these guys, particularly the guys a little bit further down. But Liam Greentree is a name that has been really interesting to me, along with Adam Jiricek. I know he just is coming off of a knee injury, but a right-handed defenseman that could be available at number 18. Henry Muse, I don't know, 18 might be a little too high for him, but he's another right-handed defenseman that might be in the mix. And then Sasha Boisvert is someone who has had his name kind of attached to the Blackhawks in the rumor mill, even though number 18 seems like it could be a little bit too high for him potentially. Michael Hage is another guy from the Chicago Steel who I think is interesting if the Blackhawks do stay home at number 18. And based on the track record from general manager Kyle Davidson since taking over, I think it's pretty likely to expect the Blackhawks at the very least to be aggressive, to at least try and pursue a trade to move up. It's not fully in their control if, they can make a move. I'm sure Davidson doesn't want to just give up the bag for nothing for a gamble of a prospect. But I do expect him to at least try to make something happen, considering it's kind of known that there's a top 16 in this year's draft class, and the Blackhawks obviously are a couple of spots behind that. So would not be shocked whatsoever if we see Kyle Davidson make a move during day one of this year's draft, like he did in 2022 when he first took over here. Next question comes from @DevFleur4398, who asked, what could it cost the Hawks to move up from number 18 to inside the top 15? So the Blackhawks in the second round, they have picks number 34 and 50. 50 was what they acquired from the New York Islanders as part of that trade to move up from number 20 to number 18 as well. They also possess the 67th overall selection, which is a high pick in the third round of this year's draft. But obviously, number 18 is going to have to be involved in that trade. 34 is going to be the most intriguing option, followed by number 50 in that circumstance. I think if they want to trade up to like number 12 or somewhere in that range, it's probably going to take number 34 if I had to imagine. But maybe it also depends on who you're trading with. 18 and 50 still probably isn't enough. Maybe if you do 1850 and a third round pick or something, that could be worth trading up from 18 to 15. But like I said, if I know that there is kind of like a top 16 consensus in this year's draft, you betcha that other general managers are going to be aware of that as well. And they're not just going to let general manager Kyle Davidson trade up for nothing. They're going to make him pay the price in order to do so. So you can't just expect them to move up for number 18 and number 67 or something like that. No, it's going to cost either 50 or 34 in this year's draft. And another interesting option, though, if they do maybe want to move up into the top 10, or maybe the asking price is a little bit higher to get to number 11 or number 12 or something like that, they do own the Toronto Maple Leafs first round pick for next year. And while there's a lot of crazy buzz going on around that team right now, odds are that pick is still probably going to be between number 22 and 32 in next year's draft. So maybe that could be a trade chip for Kyle Davidson if he's trying to get into the top 10 or the top 11 or something like that somewhere. But those are the picks that I think are most in play for the Blackhawks if they are going to trade up from number 18 in this year's draft. Next question, a two-parter, comes from @mlandon409 on YouTube, who asked, I'm just getting back into hockey. What do you recommend for me to catch up on all things hockey/Blackhawks? There's a lot of excellent hockey shows out there. The ones that I personally like the most, 32 Thoughts by Elliot Friedman is always a cracker. Frank Saravalli and the Daily Faceoff is always a very important show. I think for just general hockey news, you'll have most of it covered there. From a Blackhawks side of things, got to throw out Pat Boyle, Charlie Roumeliotis, a reoccurring guest here on the show. The Blackhawks Talk podcast for NBC Sports Chicago, I think, is very well done always. The guys over at CHGO Blackhawks do a great job. Mario, Greg, and Jay. Jay obviously is the one who got me started in this business in the first place, so I think it's only right for me to pump their show. They always do a good job. They come out every day as well. They're also on the beat and do written content, so make sure to check them out. Some good social media follows, all three of those guys: Ben Pope, Charlie Roumeliotis, Scott Powers, Mark Lazarus of The Athletic are both phenomenal follows as well. I think if you follow them, you'll have everything covered Blackhawks. And then Elliot Friedman, Frank Saravalli, The Daily Faceoff, I think they're excellent. Kevin Weeks, also a very good hockey follow on social media as well. The second part of this question comes from at mlandon40, obviously. The question is, I read that Demidov has had 2 knee surgeries. Is that true? And are they the type of surgeries we should worry about? I believe he's only had 1 knee surgery, and it was a minor knee surgery. And even from the words of Kyle Davidson himself, he said it's not one that he believes is going to be a long-term concern whatsoever. And it seems like, according to most scouts and analysts, they're not really all that concerned about it either. So I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. It is something that you absolutely have to note when you're thinking about picking a guy second overall, but it's not a concern to me. I still think he's the second overall pick. So yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about that, to be honest. Next question comes from at Elise E333, who emailed in the podcast and asked, is there someone the Hawks could pick at number 2 that you would be upset with? Ooh, it's a good question. I really think it's down to Ivan Demidov and Artem Levshinov, and to me, I don't know. It's not really even that big of a question to me. I think Ivan Demidov is kind of a no-brainer here. If they did go Artem Levshinov, I would get it because they need to address that right-handed defenseman in the prospect pool, and I think he certainly is the top defenseman in this year's draft. He's got a game that should go well to the NHL level. Good defender, good offensive instincts as well, good size. Caden Lindstrom, his mold makes sense, but I think he's a little bit of a gamble. I do think if he works out well, he has an excellent ceiling and a lot of runway. A little bit of a gamble, though. But if it's anyone outside of Demidov or Levshinov, I quite honestly would be pretty shocked. Last question comes from at fmangi88 on YouTube, who asked, would you like to see the Hawks go after Sam Reinhart as a free agent? Seems good to go after a 50-goal scorer to bolster the pitiful offensive output the Hawks have had. I would love it to get that instead of floundering again with predictable offensive woes. Unfortunately, Sam Reinhart is going to get absolutely paid this summer, and I don't see the Blackhawks being the one to dish out the biggest ticket to him. He's always been a good goal scorer, but is what he did this year repeatable? I don't necessarily know about that. And like I said, someone's going to be giving him the absolute bag. I don't think it's going to be the Blackhawks. Yeah, he would absolutely help their offense, but I think they're going to add in a couple of nice little pieces. And then summer of 2026 is when I really believe we're going to see general manager Kyle Davidson give out that first big ticket. I just don't think we're going to see it yet this summer necessarily. And I will have an episode coming up here soon talking about the top free agent options, forward and defenseman for the Chicago Blackhawks, and which ones I personally think are realistic and would like to see them pursue here before July 1st. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Make sure to go and hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. That way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's uploaded each and every day. And also make sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Won't cost you anything, 100% free. And even if you're someone who regularly watches on YouTube, just go and help me out. Please go and follow the show. It really does go a long way for your boy. You can go and follow me as well on X at Jack Bushman 2, and make sure to check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. But until tomorrow's episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Mondays. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.